the cloud. Welcome back to another episode of Ladies Kicking Ass. I'm so excited about today's conversation because I have a lot of questions. And the more I keep learning about this topic, the more questions that I have. And today's guest is Elizabeth Baker. And I actually met her through a mastermind group that we did with my business coach, Jeff Heggie. And I just love your energy, and I always have. And I feel like every time we get to talk on the masterminds when we're on there, we always have such great conversations. But Elizabeth is someone that I just love to learn from because she's very passionate about this subject. And that subject we're going to talk about today is ADHD. And it's been very interesting how often that has shown up on many of the high achieving women lady boss podcasts I have listened to recently. And so I just felt like I know that Liz knows a lot about this stuff. So I think this is good timing and a great way to have conversation surrounding it and be able to ask questions and be able to help all of you that may be thinking, what's wrong with me? So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me opportunity to have this platform to share my story and just to maybe help somebody out there that may be struggling and not realizing what it is or what's going on. And I love your podcast and I love what you do. And I'm just so grateful to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So let's just start with that. Let's talk about, and I think it's so great to give everybody a platform to be able to tell their story and why they're passionate about what they're doing. So why don't you start there? Give us your story, give us your background, tell us all about you.
Okay, so, and I'll try not to be too long-winded with this, but I grew up in Canada on the prairies in a little town of 300 people. And I had a very good, like my environment growing up. So I grew up in the 90s and where I didn't grow up with the internet. I didn't grow up with smart devices. I didn't grow up with a cell phone or anything like that, right? And I pretty much grew up in this little village that's a square mile. And so it was like almost living on a farm. And it was very conducive to somebody that has ADHD. And so I played all the sports. So I was very active. One of the things with ADHD is that we get overstimulated really easily. And so the things that are overstimulating people today and why ADHD is on the increase, especially in adults, because of the amount of input and sensory issues that we are having with all the screens and all the smart devices and just all the information coming at us all the time, right? And so I didn't really struggle in school, to tell you the truth. I was just a solid A, B+, A- type of student, very active, right? And so I didn't have any real issues actually till after I graduated high school. And I was about 21 and I was getting ready to serve a full-time mission for a year and a half for my church in Ukraine. And as I was preparing for that, my lifestyle really changed. I wasn't as active. And I noticed my anxiety levels and my depression levels were going up all of a sudden. And I had no idea because I didn't know what anxiety was. I had no idea that this sense of hopelessness and there's always something wrong. And, and I was just struggling so bad. And then I got to Ukraine and it just got worse and worse. And I had no idea what was going on. And then I was with somebody, a friend of mine, and she struggled with it growing up. And she's like, you have anxiety and depression. I'm like, oh, that's what that is? I'm like, oh, okay. So carry on. I got home and I went and saw my doctor and I started a journey of 15 years of going on and off medication for anxiety and depression. And for me personally, none of it ever really fit. None of it really helped me. None of it, for some people it does. And I love it because I'm all about getting the medication you need. Right. But it just wasn't for me. So I stopped taking it. Life went on, got married, have 5 kids, and life was just kind of hectic. Then right before COVID in 2019, I was going through an episode in my life where I was struggling. I have all these ambitions. I'm a very, like out there type of girl. Like I have all these dreams and all these passions, and my kids, my oldest at the time would have been 9. So I had 5 kids ages 9 and under. And my last one was just not even a year old. And I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about adult ADHD and all the side effects of it. And they talked about anxiety and depression. And I kid you not, the thought came to me and literally hit me on the side of the head like a brick. And I had to sit down because I was literally like carrying a laundry basket, actually full of my kids' clothes, about to go put them away. And it was so loud, and it said, "You have ADHD." And the crazy thing is my 2 oldest boys had already been diagnosed with it. And I've been blaming my husband. Like up to that point, I was blaming my husband because the doctor's like, it is genetic. So for them to have it, either you or your husband has it. And I kid you not, I remember looking over to my husband at my son's doctor appointment, and I was like, "That's you." Like I was so snobby about it too. I was like, "That's you." And like it just didn't hit, like I guess I just wasn't mentally ready to hear the truth. And I think that we all have those moments where we know it, but not until our minds are ready to hear it. And I think our minds protect us almost until we're ready to do something about it. Because up to that point, and I look back, and this is how I make sense of it all. Up to that point, I was having kids and I was nursing, and you can't take ADHD medication when you're pregnant or nursing. And so it was like almost like my mind was like, "Oh, guess what? You're done having kids. You're done with that phase of your life. Let's do something about this now. Let's get you help." And it's just crazy how it was like literally shouting at me, "You have ADHD." And I had to sit down, and I was just so like, oh, it's like one of those epiphany moments that we have sometimes, right? Like when Oprah, this is one of my favorite quotes. Oprah said once, "Your aha moments," what she calls them, or your epiphany moments. I don't know if you've ever heard of Oprah's aha moments,
Oh
but
yeah.
she said that your aha moments are when a truth that you already know is presented to you in a way that you can actually do something about it. So it was, isn't that amazing? Like, I just love that quote so much. And it was almost like my brain was like, "Okay, let's do something about this now." And within a week, I immediately called my doctor's office and I made an appointment. And a week later, I started my medication. And I kid you not, within 20, like probably I'll give it 48 hours. I could tell a difference within 20, like after that first pill, to tell you the truth. But after 48 hours, I remember looking at my husband and thinking to myself, "Oh, is this how everybody else, like, is this how other people feel all the time?" Like, I didn't realize all the voice, like all the sounds and all the stimulus that I was inputting. So, sorry if I'm talking too much. So feel free just to cut me off
this
at
is great.
any
Keep
moment.
going.
Okay, so one of the things with ADHD is, and the more like common term now is neurodivergent, which I actually really like, because it just means that our minds are operating differently. So what's happening is someone with ADHD, we input far greater amounts of either stimulus, knowledge, just everything that's going around us. We input at far greater rates than we can output. So what happens is we're inputting all the sounds and all the voices and everything that's going on around us, but we have a hard time sorting through everything. And so it's the executive portion of our brain, and I think it's the frontal cortex. I forget. I'm not a doctor, everybody, just so you know, I'm not a doctor. What's happening is most people can take the information and make sense of it all and put it in very like step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3, or sorry, 2, 3. But we, like people with ADHD, that portion of our brain just works a little bit differently. And so it doesn't process things. And so what happens is in kids, it will look like misbehavior or not being able to sit still or quote unquote bad behavior, whatever that is, right? Like not being able to sit
Yeah.
still in the chair. But at the same time, I think to myself, well, why is that so bad, not being able to sit still in a chair? Oh, it's just because we have a broken school system just a little bit. And I won't go
Oh,
into that. I won't go into that at all. That's a
we
whole
could
other
talk for
conversation.
days about that stuff. Oh
Yes.
my gosh.
And so what happens is society tells us that we're not normal, that we don't fit into this box. So then our anxiety goes up, our self-shame goes up. And someone with ADHD, one of the signs is that you constantly feel shame for whatever reason, because you're not doing enough in your mind, or the world is telling you that you're not normal, or like, especially, and it starts at a young age. Like, thankfully, I put enough shame on myself. And now that I'm an adult, like, I'm not a good enough mom. Oh, I haven't accomplished my dreams. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. Whereas, like, for my boys, they get a lot of shame at school. They really do. Or even I put it on them without even knowing, because like my patience level is low and I feel like I'm the blind leading the blind, to tell you the truth, most days.
Yeah.
And, in this is the shame that something's wrong with you, when no, nothing is wrong with you. Nothing is. And it's just a matter of knowing what your strengths are and utilizing those strengths in a way that is positive, in a way that produces positive outcomes for you, for yourself, and those people around you. So just because, like, for example, I will never forget my second son, who would have been probably 8 at the time, 7 or 8. So we go to church, and then we were sitting in church, and I remember, and it was one of those places, like, you really do have to sit there, right? And it can be hard. And he just turned to me and he was getting all fidgety and stuff, and he wouldn't sit still. And he was aggravating me because it's like my nervous system, like my own like sensory issues were like going off. And this was before I know, this would have been, maybe he was even younger, because this was before I was diagnosed and I knew what was going on with myself. He's like, it's like, he's like, I have pain. It's painful. It's literally painful for them to sit still. It's like nails down your back. You know how like sometimes if someone was to like scratch your back really hard and you're like sitting there and you're cringing, like that's what it's like. And it's hard because as kids, you have a lot more rules than you do, like a lot less freedom to, and knowledge and tools given to you to know how to handle that. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the difference. Like, you talked a little bit about how is it different in kids and adults. Well, with adults, we have a little more tools available to us. We have a little more freedom to know, and a little more knowledge and maturity, I guess, for lack of a better word, to be like, oh, like, this is painful to me, but I'll still just sit here because this is what I'm supposed to do. And I'm not saying that that's right necessarily. Like, I think there needs to be, as a society as a whole, if you're in a meeting, let's say you're at a board meeting and you are the owner and you have a board and you have an employee that needs to just get up and walk around. They're not doing anything to show disrespect to you or the company. They just like, let them walk around for a minute, let them stand up, let them have a little more freedom in processing what's going on around them. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
It totally does. And I think I wrote down when you were talking that, like, even with the kids, even like what you're talking about, like you're in a meeting, you got to get up and stand up and move around. Like, I find myself doing that and stuff. I have a very hard time just sitting still doing stuff too. But like kids in schools and in situations when you're at work, like we've all been conditionally taught that there's one specific way to behave, and this is proper behavior, and anything other than this is misbehavior.
oh yeah.
And it's not taking into account anything else that's going on in that human's life. You're just supposed to sit and do these things. I know when you go back to talk about the kids situation, my son deals with this all the time, and he's not hyper and in everybody's face and doing things, but he just has a very hard time just sitting still or actually paying attention to someone just lecture talking all the time. Give him something to do that he can be doing with it to learn, and he learns so much better that way. But in our school systems, we have been set up that there's something wrong with you because you can't pay attention. And every year that my son has been in school, one of his teachers has said, you might want to take him to the pediatrician and see, basically what's wrong with him. And I'm like, I get that he's not picking up his stuff, and he does have a learning disability. So I realize that he's not picking things up fast enough, but that doesn't necessarily, when you say what's wrong with him, you have now put him in this box of like the I don't know another word to say it, like the disobedient children that are at school, and it's truly not like a cognitive thing that he's doing wrong. So I think a lot of moms, in me talking to other moms at school, also are kind of have heard that from teachers, and we kind of struggle with like, where do you go next with this stuff? So having a child or having children that have ADHD, like what was your process in deciding whether or not to take them to the doctor to get diagnosed? Like what is the benefit of being diagnosed with it versus just saying, we know that he's got some ADHD tendencies, and so we're going to try to do something else?
Okay, I am so glad you asked me this question. I am so glad. So like I said, I have two boys, my two oldest boys. So it goes boy, boy, girl, boy, boy. Those are my kids. And the oldest, he'll be 13 really soon. And then the one that's just below him, they're only 15 months apart. So he'll be 12 this year. And honestly, they're both diagnosed with ADHD, but if you were to see them, they couldn't be more polar opposite in personality, in traits, in looks. My oldest is taller than I am. He's a big boy. He does all the things, right? And he whatever. And then the 15-month, or the one that's just 15 months younger than him, he barely comes up to he doesn't even come up to my shoulders, right? Like he's really small. And the way he is, and because of that, even the way their ADHD manifests itself is so different. And so, which has been a struggle, because when they were first diagnosed, both of them were diagnosed when they were each in kindergarten. And we decided to go ahead and get the diagnosis because it's, to me, in my mind, knowledge is power. And just knowing where the behavior was coming from took away so much of the anxiety and the pressure and this not knowing of like, what do we do to help them? Because I think at the end of the day, as parents, we just want to help our kids. We really do. Yeah. Like most of us, like I'm not all of us, but most of us just want our kids to be good human beings. We want them to enjoy life. We want them to be happy. And so when you look at your child and you see them struggling, you want to take that struggle away. And so so I have like we had them both on medication when they were younger. Concerta is what we use for them, and which was great for a few years. And we'd only give it to them on days that they needed to go to school or whatever. Mind you, please note, everybody that's listening, I am not a professional. Please talk to your professional doctor about anything, okay? Or refer to the professionals. I am just trying to share our story and what we did. So I just wanted to give that brief disclaimer to everybody out there listening to this. But after a few, and it helped. My sons were happier at school. They were actually able to connect with other kids. One of the signs for my oldest son, because he didn't exhibit the quote unquote like bad behavior. Like he would sit quietly in his desk and he wouldn't fight with other kids. Whereas my second son, Eli, he does. He would fight with other kids, and you could tell that he was just overstimulated all the time. And he, and bless this kindergarten teacher's heart. I love her. Like, I owe so much to this woman. She would give Eli noise canceling headphones during class. And she noticed that when she would do that, his overall behavior was a lot more calm, and it provided for a lot better days for him, right? And so, but fast forward, and my older son, he just was starting to get a little more depressed and a little sad. And we decided that we talked to our pediatricians time and time again. Like, we consulted our pediatrician, but then we also trusted our hearts and our knowledge, because you have to trust yourself too, because you do know your child better than anybody else. And so if you in your heart know and say to yourself, actually, no, I think this is the best course, then you got to listen to yourself too. Because for my oldest son, we actually took him off of his medication, and he hasn't been medicated he's in 7th grade. We took him off when he was in 5th grade. And does he struggle with organization? Oh, yes. Do we have lots of missing assignments? Yes. But he's happy. He has friends. And we can teach him. Like, people with ADHD, yes, we struggle with certain things, but we can still be taught. We're not stupid. Like sometimes it is hard for us to stay organized, whatnot, but there's still ways and tools that you can learn without having to do medication. Whereas my younger son, Eli, for him, we switched him off with the Concerta because it was doing the same things to him. We tried going without it, and that was the poor child. He was struggling with anxiety like crazy, and depression without it as well. That wasn't helping. He wasn't engaged. Oh, this is another sign that people don't realize that has to do with ADHD. Because ADHD and autism are actually in the same sphere of, like, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know the technical terms, but they're both considered to be neurodivergent. It's not a disease. It's not like behaviors. Behaviors.
Like a
right? Condition. There, that's the better word for it. And so one of the things about people with autism that we just know, that society just knows and respects, is that disconnect with other people. There's always that, like, they can't connect with other people on the same level as other people, just like I don't even know what the right word is, but people with ADHD tend to have the same issue a little bit, where yes, we make eye contact, yes, we do other things, but it's very easy to disconnect from people around you. And so that worried me. As a mom, that's not how people want to live, right? Like, and if there was something that we could do to help him, like, he wasn't interested in school. He wouldn't do any of his schoolwork. And the kid's brilliant. The kid is smart. For the longest time, he would always test in math way above his grade level. Then all of a sudden, and this is all happening this year, by the way, he's in 5th grade this year. And we have spent the majority of the year, we took him off his meds to see if he didn't want to take his meds, so we didn't force him. So we've never forced our boys to take medicine that they did not want to take. We've always tried to listen to our boys. And even though they're young, you have to listen to your kids. You have to.
Yeah.
And that's really important. Really, really important. And so we decided, like, that's another tip, include the kids in these decisions. Educate your kids. Let them know what their options are. And he said, Mom, I do not want to take that medicine anymore. And I said, okay. But it wasn't helping without it either. And so we went back to his pediatrician and we got him on different medication. It's been night and day. Like, he's happy. He's starting to get friends. He hasn't had a missing assignment since he started taking this new medication, right? Like, so medication can be a lifesaver for some kids, but it may not be needful for other kids. And then that's okay. And same with adults. I know plenty of kids or adults that really do have ADHD, but for whatever reason, they don't feel like they need medication, and that's okay. Like if they're functioning in a way that they want to, like that's okay. For me, I take it every day, and it's not even so much that I maintain this hyper focused state of mind. It's just it helps regulate the stimulation. So my anxiety has gone way down. I'm no like I still get anxiety, but I know where it's coming from. So it takes the edge off of it. Or we'll all of a sudden say, like, if I'm during the day, if my kids have been in my face all day, because we're all loud, we're a big bundle of energy because we're inputting so much of it during the day.
Sure.
I'll just go to my room and lock my door and just meditate. And turn on those meditative sounds and turn off the stimulus. That's one of my biggest tips. And also exercise. If you truly feel like you have ADHD and you're struggling with all the anxiety that's probably coming from it, that's interfering with your relationships, interfering with your job, how you're handling day-to-day stress, try just little things like meditation, blocking off as much stimulants as you can, and also exercising. Because what's happening is you're inputting too much and you're not outputting it. And so whether it's like sensory, it's really interesting because you're inputting like sounds and words and information, but a really good way of processing all of that is to go work out, whether it's taking a walk around the block. For me, it doesn't have to be like this, where you have to sign up at a gym or you have to put in these like hour long. It could be a 5 to 10 minute walk around your office, around the building, anywhere, right? Just get up or go change in even environments. So let's say like people are bugging you a lot in like you're getting a ton of phone calls and people are coming into your office. Get up and go move your environment somewhere else for a minute. And that if it means the bathroom, that's why I think moms will go lock themselves in the bathroom, because it's just a change of environment where you can lock your kids out for, like 10 minutes or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so for me personally, I actually have severe ADHD, which causes really, really high levels of anxiety. So I will go, for me personally, like I wake up between 5 and 5:30 most mornings, and I will go to the gym and will work out for about an hour. And you don't have to do that. Trust me, I'm not saying that you have to, but I just know for me, and I usually do a pretty hardcore workout. Like I get my heart up going. I'll lift weights just because I have a more severe case than probably most people, to tell you the truth. But that has been a lifesaver for me, is the exercise along with the medication. Like I can't just I'll exercise plus I take medication, right? And it's made a big difference in my life, huge difference. And that's why I think that I'm so passionate about sharing my story, about talking about ADHD, even though I'm not a doctor. And I will never tell anybody, well, you need to do A, B, C, D. That I will never tell anybody. Like I'll share tips, but like it's very personalized, like the journey of ADHD. And like you have to like listen to your heart and trust yourself, because I think that's something else too people with ADHD have a hard time doing, because honestly they really do. This sounds so bad, but we really do have so many voices in our head, always there. Like I remember finding out for the first time that there's people out there that don't hear voices in their head, or don't have a continuous monologue in their mind all the time. And I was blown away. I'm like, wait, you don't have a running monologue in your brain everywhere you go? And they're like, no. I'm like, that's so weird.
I think it is weird though, for things like, the more that I'm learning about this and the more that I pay attention to things, I'm like, that explains a lot of things. I have never been diagnosed with that, but the more that I see it in my son, and the more that I start picking up and I keep listening to people talking about it, I'm like, holy shit, like for so long, I thought that was normal for sure. And I know my husband says to me a lot too. He's like, do you ever just stop? Like, do you ever stop? And I look at him like, why would I do that? Like, because my brain has never not, it's never just been like, I'm cool with just hanging out here right now. Like, I think that's just, and a lot of us, I think, that don't understand it kind of look at it like it's this high achieving thing. I got to do this
Oh,
stuff. I got to do this stuff. But for me too, a lot of it, like, one, there's this still anything with mental health stuff. There's still this, I don't even know what to call it, freaking
stigma,
shitty
maybe?
cloud around it,
Yeah,
you know?
stigma, maybe.
Yeah, stigma, thank you, around this that's like, if you're hearing voices in your head, you're like a schizo, or you're like you need to be in a mental institution or something like that, you know, that
Yeah.
that you need to be super medicated if you're hearing all of this stuff. But I think a lot of us find ways to manage that. For me, has been very much like, I'll just start a new project. I'll just organize something else. I'll just do this. I'll just do this, because then I feel like I'm pacifying those things that I'm talking to myself. I don't feel like there's someone else that's talking to me. I feel like I'm constantly talking to myself in my head. So
Yes.
it's not like another personality coming out in there. It's just me constantly questioning, asking, making sure this is a great choice, whether, doesn't matter if it's business or if it's work or being a mom or it's something with your husband. Like, I'm constantly questioning everything, and it scares me to death to just sit in silence and have to answer all of those questions. So if I stay busy, I don't have to worry about that. Did you find that when you started doing medication exercise, I do notice that it does get better for me when I am going to the gym. So did you find that you were able to kind of quiet that in your head?
Yes, because I love that you brought that up because, okay, that's exactly it. You described it spot on. It's not like we have like these multiple, though if you ask my husband, maybe he thinks they're more like multiple personalities. But joking aside, when I'm exercising, I'm able to, okay, so this is another thing. When you have ADHD, yes, you tend to get distracted really easily because you do have that multiple monologues that you're having with yourself because you're doubting and you get distracted and all that kind of stuff. But when I work out, I'm hyper focused on doing a task where it silences all the different monologues. But even like when I'm working out sometimes, if I am doing something that's not pushing me as much, let's say, or is just repetitive, then I start those, and I don't know why these voices are like the monologues are so negative. Like they're just like naturally, this is what you have to, and this is where the self-work comes in and the discipline and like,
Yeah.
and the work, because it does take work, it does take effort to change, because naturally we are more natural, like more apt to have those monologues to be negative self-talk, and it is so, it's so exhausting. And I feel like once I started the medication and once I got onto a regular workout plan, I'm able to control those thoughts. Like, for example, if I'm at the gym and let's say I'm in a group fitness class and negative
Mhm.
thoughts so that will come up that I will have to stop, like actually tell myself, stop it, Elizabeth, stop it, is, oh, I'm not as skinny as that girl. Oh, I don't have as many muscles as that girl. I'm better than that girl. Even those, like, be careful. Like, yes, we're negative in the sense of we'll cut ourselves down before other people,
Sure.
but you got to be careful of those other thoughts, that thinking that you're better than somebody else because you're able to do something that they can't. Like your thought, like I find my thoughts will wander if I'm not really like intentional with what
Mhm.
I'm choosing to think about. And so, but so you can't beat yourself up because you had the thought of, oh, I'm so much better than her, but what you can do is be like, remind yourself that thought is negative, that thought is false. And that helps a lot. And you say it very like loudly in my mind. And then I will like reshift my focus. I won't look at that girl anymore because it's not her. Like, she's done nothing wrong. She's wonderful. She showed up. She's
Mhm.
doing her thing. She's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, and what helps me too is being intentional with training myself on the thoughts that I want to have, because we have
Yeah.
the power to to trace, like we can't always choose what thoughts pop into our head, but we always have the choice to choose what we do with it. And so one way that I will try to be more intentional and stop myself from having these negative thoughts, whether it's about myself or somebody else, is physically like counteract it. Like, so if I had that thought pop into my head, negative about a certain person at the gym, whether it was, oh, she's looking at me funny, or she's judging me, which are false. That's your brain telling, like giving you false information, or even let's say it's even true. Let's say she was judging you for whatever reason, right? Me going up to that girl afterwards, or woman, and that's just because I'm in these women classes, so I'm saying woman, and complimenting her, like out loud, saying, hey, you're really awesome, whatever, like you don't have to make it weird, but like by like being positive towards her, that's power. Because what you're doing when you say those things out loud, like it kind of manifests itself, and then your brain, you start training your brain to realize that like what's actually true and what's actually false. And it also goes a long ways. Let's say she did have judgmental feelings towards you. It actually kind of goes a long ways of like proving to her that you're not a crappy person, like you did nothing wrong, right? And so even though it's not your job to prove to anybody your worth, it's not. And if you can't control other people's thoughts and what they do with them, and it's not your job to go around your entire life trying to prove to the world that you're a good person. So don't get me wrong with that aspect, but it does go a long way. Like if you're having these negative thoughts that you don't want to have, that you don't want to carry around anymore, then you can do something about it, right?
Absolutely.
And that's my point. That's my point. Like, not that you have to prove that you're a good person. Never do that. Like that will lead down to a life of misery if you spend your life trying to prove to the world that you're a good person. But you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually on a coaching call before this, and we were talking about how the coach that I'm working with on this stuff, we went through a program that was kind of like your survivalist model, like what is your survival model, like how you were raised, things that you hold on to, just kind of thought processes that are like your default thought processes, and how when you are aware of them and where they are coming from, how you can start catching yourself going back to that old survival brain mentality of things, like if I find myself really getting into like this imposter feeling of like, who the hell do you think you are doing this? Or who the hell do you think you're doing this? I remember so much that my dad would say that all the time. Who the hell do you think you are? What do you think you're doing? Like constantly. And that stuck with me so bad that and then for years, I would question myself and almost minimize myself because that was just a constant question in my head. And I would hear myself saying it, not him saying it to me, but hear myself saying that. But going through her program and learning, this is the way, like it was an old survival thing. Like if I stay small in here, I'm not worried about being rejected by anybody else. But being able to call that out. And for me, I have to like physically, like audibly say, like, you're doing it again, like knock that shit off. You don't want to be doing this again. The real way to be thinking about this is you do have some value to give to someone. And even if you can't see it right now, being consistent and showing up, you'll be able to see what you've been able to do. So I think once you recognize those things, you can start calling yourself out. I think a lot of us wait for other people to reject us, or which is like that mind shift you go to, like, I'm going to get rejected by this, or someone's not going to like me, or if you're a people pleaser, in that area of like, we're manifesting shit that hasn't even happened yet, but in our brains, because that was like our safe spot, we're doing that. Being able to recognize that and call it out is so incredibly important. I talk to myself all day long. I don't know if anybody else does that.
Oh, I kid you not. I have a younger sister, and I remember her telling me like years ago while we were growing up, she's like, I used to follow you to school and just listen to you talk to yourself the whole way to school. I would never notice her. But I just started laughing because I talk to myself all the time. But going back to what you were saying about our thoughts and like their safe place and what we do with our thoughts. This is like once you have a realization that you have power to choose what to do with those thoughts, because those thoughts are just completely false and that person's not going to reject you, is not going to make fun of you, or whatever your fear is, right? Like whatever your fear is either not true, or let's say it is true. Let's say that person does reject you, or you don't get the job you want, or you don't get the deal you want, or whatever it is, right? Or like your spouse says something really horrific to you, right? That just cuts you down, right? Or a parent, whatever
Right.
the case may be. Once you get the realization that you have the power, like they don't have power over you. So even if they do that, say whatever that negative fear does come true, you have to train yourself in saying, well, so what? I can still do something about it, right? Like you don't have to, like you just are very, like you have power to make the choices that you need to make. And so you get rejected, let's say, from this dream job. Well, you still have choices. You don't have to feed into it. You don't have to, you have to realize like, okay, that person may think this of me, but I know deep down that I'm not that person. I'm not whatever false narrative they are creating in their minds about you. Guess what? That's none of your business. It doesn't have power over you. And it's okay. Like, don't waste your time trying to change other people's thoughts. Spend
Yes.
100% of your energy working on your own thoughts, because that's where your power comes from. Your power doesn't come from somebody else. It comes from within. It comes from your belief system. It comes from what you think about yourself. It comes from what you think about others. It really does. It comes from, like it comes from within. Like even like I'm a very religious person, and so it's a big part of my life. And so like it comes from my own belief and my own religion of a higher power, of God, or whatever that may be. Like those are the things that are going to give you power. Don't worry about what some, and not to be a man hater, because I love the men in my life and they're an essential part of society, and don't even begin. I'm not a man hater in any way. But if you find yourself in a male dominated situation, and what comes from that situation is when there's multiple men that you're having to deal with on a date, whether you're the only woman that's at the table of whatever company, let's say, or maybe you're the boss of multiple men or whatever. Like society has taught us that we need to step over, like we need to step aside, or like we've always tried to play, like women have tried to play into like that. Like, I don't know. I just feel like it doesn't matter what, like what society says about what you're supposed to be doing or whatever. Or like even for our kids, like I try to teach my kids, my boys, and I have 4 boys and only 1 girl. So please don't get me wrong. I love the boys and the men in my life. Okay. They're incredible human beings. But I'm trying to raise them in such a way that they start realizing that they have to stop categorizing people all the time. Like, don't look at somebody. Stop trying to categorize people. Like, that's what we all do. Like, sometimes as women, we look at a man and we just assume that he hates us, that he wants to rule over us, that he wants to dominate us, which is not always true, right? Like, stop trying to categorize people. Don't worry about what they want you to do. Don't worry about, like, just think to yourself, am I like I have my own power. I feel like I've been set on a certain path to accomplish a certain task, to accomplish a certain dream. And I'm not going to let people have power over me. Like there's this way, like, obviously, like there's this, it's not so black and white, because like you have to treat people kindly. And I think that's where power comes. And if you're somebody that knows how to treat other people kindly and with respect and with dignity, that will just give yourself power. That's not you cowing over to somebody. That's not you playing a doormat to somebody. Never be a doormat, but just like embrace it and like just treat people nicely. And you'll find that you have this, like, that will give you power, because you know who you are and you know how you work and you know like you can go to bed at night knowing that you did right by yourself, you did right by your family, and you did right by those that are either like your employees or coworkers or other people you interact with on a daily basis. That's what's going to give you joy and peace at the end of the day, not the bank account full of millions of dollars, which is nice. Like, I'm not against money by any means. Like, it comes first, security and peace. But at the end of the day, how you got that money matters in my mind, right? And
Absolutely.
and I think why I'm so pro like talking about ADHD is because, and you brought this up at the beginning, is society and why people with ADHD, why we struggle so bad is because we have been taught there's only one way of functioning as a human. There's only one way to be nice. There's only one way to be successful. There's only one way to obtain whatever, right? Millions of dollars in your bank account, right? But that's false. And once you realize that and realize that, like, and this is how I used to describe people, like my son, to people, it's like, if you tell my son, like, if you tell my son to go from point A to point B, he will get there. Just don't expect him to go in a straight line. He'll get there. Don't worry. Just leave him alone. Help him when you can, but like, don't force him to go in a straight line, because then he's not going to get there, because that's not how his mind works. That's not how I work. That's what I say about myself.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, I'll get it done. Just tell me what you need me to do, but don't expect me to do it your way, and we'll be fine. You know? And there's you can still be a wonderful, good person and not do it the same way as other people. Like, you just can't.
Yes. And I think too that there is great levels of success that from people that have ADHD. And I think a lot of times, and I love that you put this on your website too, but I think it truly can be a superpower for people if you understand it and you use that properly. I think anything that people kind of look at as like maybe a handicap or something is different about you can definitely be a superpower. I know my tendencies with this stuff make me extremely productive with getting shit done. Like, that's just my mentality all the time. I've been able to build very successful businesses. It has served me very well. On the flip side of that too, because I feel like I need to be busy all the time, am I as present for my family as I want to be? And the older that I get, the more that shifts, because I did use it so much in my business. Well, my business has grown now to the point that I don't have to be doing all the things because I have a team now. So now what do I do to harness all of this energy that I need to put out somewhere to be able to still deal with what's happening in my mind, because that doesn't go away just because the business is getting to a better place. So being able to pivot and being able to put that energy into new places, like creating this podcast and the Ladies Kicking Ass community, and being able to give back and help with stuff is so very important to me in my life right now. That I feel like the more aware you are of things, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. And it doesn't need to be looked at as if it is a limitation or that you need a medication for this or something is wrong with you. Like, we have to stop that story that there's something wrong with us and that there's only one way to be normal.
Oh,
because
100%.
there's
I
a
agree with
million
you.
different ways to get there.
Oh, it's so true. Like, I'm so sorry for cutting you off, but
No, you're fine.
That's my ADHD, and I'm so sorry. But you just made me so happy, and because that is so true on so many levels, because people will try to shame me because I'll get hyper focused, interested into something, and I'll start it. And then just because my energy will shift and be like, no, what that interest served me. It fulfilled me. I did what I wanted to do with it. And even though it may not look complete to somebody else, I'm done and I'm ready to move on. And that is actually a superpower that allows for a lot of success in somebody's life. But what happens is the world will tell you that, oh, you never finish anything. You are such a failure because you don't finish what you start, you know, and you have to learn how to block those thoughts. So what if I have 50 different hobbies? Who cares? Like, who cares if you start something and it just doesn't like interest you anymore, it's not serving you anymore, then move on, and that's okay. Like there's nothing, that is
Yes.
how your mind works. And who's to say that like why are we saying that that's so bad? Because why is that so bad? It's not. And so by talking about these things and by sharing our stories and saying this is what my life is like, then other people, it may help other people walk away from that shame that we put on ourselves, or that the world wants to put on us. And that is so, so, so true. And it actually allows for really successful business owners, really successful people, because they're able to, one, pivot when they feel like they need to pivot. And I have never owned a business, but from what I can tell, but I've been around a lot of entrepreneurs, I've been around a lot of business people. And one of the biggest things that I've noticed that has led to success for them is knowing how to pivot and when to pivot their direction and their focus. And people with ADHD, we have zero problems when it comes to like needing to pivot when we need to, but like when we're in that hyper focus mentality, yes, we're like a stone wall and we'll get it done, we'll get it focused. But honestly, like when we start to lose that interest or start to lose like, oh, this is not working for us anymore, we really can just pivot. Like it's okay. But it has to come from within. Like I said, ADHD is a superpower, but there's also certain kryptonites. Like, for example, that say, this is one of the things, and this all comes down to knowing who you are. And once you know this about yourself, it makes it a lot easier to deal with. But like, for example, my one son, Eli, or actually all my kids actually struggle with this. And or not all, I shouldn't say all, but several of them. If they have it, like for my 4-year-old, for example, I'll talk about my 4-year-old Teddy. The kid's a hoot. I'm surprised he hasn't run in here yet. But if I tell him in the morning that we are going to the park that day, and then he has it in his mind and he'll get really excited. He wants that. And he wants to go get that park, right? He wants to go to the park. And all of a sudden something comes up and I can't take him to the park that day. It's really hard on him. It's really, really, really hard. And honestly, that like personality trait can be a superpower, because that drive to get what you want is needed if you want to be successful in the entrepreneurial world. If you want to start a successful business, you have to have that personality. And that's why people with ADHD are really successful at businesses. But on the flip side, that exact same tendency can also be your kryptonite, because if you're in a business that you're so hyper focused on doing it a certain way or something like that, and you can't pivot, then that can also be really hard too, and that can bring you down. But like I have to say, like my 4-year-old, like if he wants to go to the park, come hell or high water, that kid is going to get to the park, even if he has to walk there himself. Like, and I admire that of him. As a parent, it's frustrating. As a parent, it's like it's really draining. But that, to me, like that offers up like a really good quality when it comes to being a business person or an entrepreneur, or just attaining the goals that you are set to, that you want to achieve. But like going back to the pivot thing, people with ADHD are also really good because they don't just rest on their laurels. That's what I like to, I don't know if that saying, if you know what that saying means, but like, you want to know where it comes really quickly? Do you want to know where it comes from? This is the nerdy part of me. So back in ancient Greece, when they started the Olympics, the winner would get a crown of laurel leaves for their reward, which represented wins. So if you owned a laurel wreath, like a plant called the laurel crown, what do you call it? Like, what do you call a crown made of like plants? I forget. But anyways, I don't know. What do you call it? I forget. But anyways, so the saying
all I can think of is tiara,
whatever, like a like a laurel crown. The saying comes, don't rest on your laurels, meaning don't rest on your wins. Just because you won something, don't just rest there thinking that that's the end. What you do is you take that win and you put it towards something else. And I think that's what people with ADHD actually are really good at, is like, that win was nice. That's great. Okay, what's next? What can I do? right? And that's what I'm talking about when like it really is just because you have the personality that switches like interests, that's actually you can learn to harness that really well, right?
Yeah. I
So
think it can be extremely, extremely helpful. And I think it's just really being aware of things too, and not beating yourself up. If this is something that sounds like things that you struggle with, this is exactly how I was listening to podcasts and people talk about it, and it is very interesting and it does spark wanting to learn more about it. And I think that in itself, even if you decide that you don't want to go to the doctor and you don't want to do any of this stuff, just knowing that, hey, these are tendencies that I have with stuff, and me thinking that there's something wrong with me is not the fact. It is the fact that this is how my brain works. It's no different than if your brain works this way if it's red, this way if it's blue, this way if it's yellow. Like they're all the same, like they're all the same level of color. You know what I mean? Like
oh,
just because there's a different path doesn't mean that there's
yes.
something wrong.
No, we can all have the same like goals. We can be one, like we can like be one in purpose. We can like just because like the two students, let's say you have two students that both like want to get a certain grade on a test. Well, you're not going to force each student to study in the exact same way. Yes, the answers have to be the same, but how that student gets to that answer can be totally different, and that's okay.
Yes.
Like my son Eli, he taught me this. It was so cute. In third grade, his teacher was just like, I went for a parent teacher interview, and she tells me the story of one of the struggles is like Eli will never write down his work on how he gets to the answer, and you have to show your work. And I'm like, well, he's saying the answers, he's not cheating. So she goes to him and says, like, how did you come up with this answer? It's right, but how did you come up with this answer? And he turns to her and goes, oh, my brain just goes do 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 do, and then I have the answer. And that was his thing. Like he just he's like computing. He's like, my brain just computes it. And like, he's like computing. Like he has like this whole monologue in his mind. He like pictures a computer producing the answer, right? Yeah. And like, that's how he came to it. Just don't ask him how he got there, but he got there, right? And I think that that's, we have to realize that we can come up with the same conclusions or the same answers, but don't force people to get there in the exact same way. Like you'll have to do things a little bit different, right? And so that's been a really eye-opener for me in my life, and saying, yeah, like I can be successful in my life, but I don't have to do it the exact same way somebody else does it, right? Like,
sure.
Like, or what does that even look like? And actually success is very individualized. How you view success and what is successful is very individualized. Because like for me, like right now in my life, in this moment in my life, it's very much about my kids. I still have young kids at home, and that's just what I've chosen. And that's not to say I've put other things on the back burner. It's not to say that I don't have my own hopes and dreams that I will get to. But I'm going to get to them on my own timing when I feel right about it. And I'm not even saying that if you have young kids, you have to stay home. No, I'm not saying that at all. That's just my choice. That's what I want to do. And that's what I feel comfortable. And that's what I want, like what my success is right now. But that's not going to look the same.
Girl, first of all, if you've got all these little kids at home, you are not just sitting at home.
No.
That's the hardest job in the world. Like when people will
really
say to me like, well, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I'm like, bullshit. That is
No.
not just. You have to take the just. You're not just anything. Like I'm a plumber. I'm a mom. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm a work my ass off at home mom. It should be the term that people use, because you never stop all day long. When I'm at home, my son has been sick a couple times this week. Like when I'm at home at the end of the day, I'm like, where the hell did all my time go? When I'm at work, I can see what I'm doing all day long. When I'm at home, you're just going crazy. So you got your plate full.
Yes. Well, that comes down to the whole, like not judging somebody else for the way they're doing their life. Like you just can't. Like if they're fulfilled, if you are fulfilled at the end of the day, worn out, frustrated, you can be frustrated and still feel fulfilled. You can have anxieties and stress and a hard life and still be fulfilled, because what you're doing is you're still making choices to put that future life that you do want into like actually into your life. Like, how do I explain this? So even though the majority of my day is spent driving my kids around, because I don't have kids that drive yet, you know, like doing things I actually really hate. I hate being an Uber mom. I really don't like driving other
Me
people
too.
around. I hate it. But what helps me is the fact that like, but what I do want are kids that are involved in different aspects of society, that are involved in a sport, or like he doesn't mean they have to do all the things, but like that's what gets me into that car driving around picking up kids, because I want them to become really good human beings that have experience in life, and I know driving around to these different things is going to pay off in the long run, right? And so that's why I do it. I don't like cleaning. I hate cleaning. I hate cleaning toilets. And thankfully my kids are getting old enough where they will help out and they will do it too. But like I think to myself, but I do want a clean house. I do want some sort of order in my house. So if it means me having to clean these stupid toilets that I hate, sorry to offend any plumbers out there, but
You're not offending us.
Waste management people out there. I just don't like cleaning toilet, right? But it's going to get me to what I actually want. And it could involve me taking the time to show my kids how to clean the toilet. Like if you don't want to clean the toilet, then teach your kids how to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like there's always a way to live a life that is fulfilling. You always have choices. You always have choices. And that is what I would like want to leave people with, that the most at the end of this conversation is the fact that no matter how your mind works and no matter what your life looks like, if your life looks like you in a way that you don't want it to look like, you have choices. If your mind works in a way that maybe is not like, maybe you do wish you have the mind that's silent all the time. Maybe you do wish you had the mind that put everything in this perfect order so you can get from point A to point B in this very super straight line. Guess what? It's going to take some work, and it's going to be hell probably for a while, because that's just not like, but there's ways of doing things. There's ways of learning. There's ways like you still have choices. And honestly, and this is my opinion, even though you can beat yourself up and train yourself to have your mind work in that way, my advice is to stop, embrace the way your mind works, and you'll still get to that point B. But the sooner you just embrace the way your mind works and work with it rather than against it, you're going to be so much better off. Just like, trust me, I have bought planners after these stupid planners, and that I forget to write things down in, and I forget the appointment, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, had I just written it down, like write it down, you know. And a lot of times I will try to write it down because it does help, but like maybe you just need maybe you'll work better with timers. Like I work really well with setting timers, and when I hear that beep go off, then it helps shift my mind. It weeds through all the chaos that's going on to where I need to go to my next task, right? Like there's ways of working with your mind that you don't need to beat yourself up for. So stop beating yourself up just because you have a mind that works differently, and go get help, because there is help, whether it's talking to somebody like me or somebody else, or working through it, or maybe it is going to the doctor because you want to get that edge off anxiety, and maybe you're at a point where you have severe ADHD like I do, and you actually really do need the doctor's help, right? Do the little things, start exercising in the morning or do something. But at the end of the day, you have power, and that is what's going to give you peace, because you can still choose to do something about it. That's just what I want to say to people. That's what I want to preach right now.
Yes. And it's so true. So good, so good, so true. Thank you so much for spending time with us. I know you got to go, because I know you got to go pick up your kids from school.
That's
so
fine.
I could sit and talk to you forever. We'll have to do another one. But I know that this helps so many people, because even if you're not a person that talks about it, and I'm one of those people, if it impacts you to the point of you saying, oh shit, that sounds an awful lot like me, then know that you're not alone. And that there are all different kinds of levels of us that struggle with this stuff, and that there's not something wrong with you. You're not alone. There's not something wrong. Pay attention to what works best for you and be really consistent with that. And I think just adding one little thing at a time, if you need to be able to compound the effects of what works best for you, is just the very best way to be able to handle that. But thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us about this and to have this conversation, because it's so great. If you guys want to talk to Liz more about this, I'm going to put all of her information in the show notes. So you can reach out to her, follow her on Instagram. She's just fantastic to have a conversation with, and she's just a wonderful lady after all. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This has been amazing. I appreciate it.
Awesome.